Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ashley Barlow Company podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host. If you are a parent, a teacher, or someone who works at a school, or you're a community member, a volunteer, or a staff member at an organization that supports people with special education plans, a coach, a tutor, or even a grandparent, you're in the right place. Sit back with an ice cold glass of lemonade, put on your walking shoes and grab some headphones, roll down the windows and cruise. Ready, set, go. Educate, advocate, collaborate.
Welcome back to another episode of Special Education Advocacy with Ashley Barlow. I'm Ashley Barlow, and I'm so happy you're here. Okay, friends, we are back. As promised, we did take about 2 weeks off from the podcast. Well, exactly 2 weeks off from the podcast. I was on what I like to call a swimcation. We had 2 swim meets in a row, 12 days of swim meet. It was a lot, I will tell you. And in 2 different cities. And then I enjoyed a little bit of time with my family. So it has been a little quiet around here. I don't know if I've mentioned on the podcast or on social media, but this is the first summer that the Barlow family has not had super consistent childcare. I always say I hire dynamic people, and dynamic people are busy. And that's just a risk that you take when you hire dynamic people. And so our college babysitter she plays a sport and went back a month earlier than expected this summer. And for the first year ever, I was like, you know what? I just am not going to scramble and find somebody else. And so I've been spending most of the daytime hours with my boys. And then I've been doing my work in the mornings and in the evenings and kind of in between. And it's worked out. But Griffin told me not too long ago, a couple of days ago, that he's ready to go back to school. And I think as we get closer and closer, I am ready for them to go back to school too. So ready to get back into the swing of things. So I hope that you had a nice couple of weeks since we chatted last and that you are starting to get towards back to school also. Today, I thought that we would talk about back to school for kids with anxiety, whether it's school anxiety or kind of like generalized anxiety. I have kind of like a number one tip that I have started to implement for Jack in particular, relative to some school anxiety and something that I would probably call school refusal, honestly. And then I've got kind of another list of things that are tried and true here in my house and also with a lot of my clients. And so let's talk about some tips to go back to school for kids that have school refusal, anxiety, some executive functioning stuff, and really kind of everybody, right? Like, I love school. I love going back to school. One funny story is that before we had kids or before our kids were school aged, I would see kids going into school. We have always lived within a block of a school. So we used to live by a little Catholic school, and now we live by the public elementary school where my kids went. Um, and I would be like, oh, I love this time. I love the moms dropping off the kindergartners and everybody in their fresh new outfits and their new backpacks and stuff. And my husband used to be like, oh, that day is awful. I'm like, see, you can think different things about school. And that's kind of the underlying sentiment for this episode, honestly, is that, we all do have separate and different sentiments about school, and we can hold space for all of those, right? Like, we can equally love some things about school and hate some things about school. But the objective fact is that it is literally mandated by law that we go to school. And so we have to make the most of it. So I think some tips are in order, but I also think that we need to, kind of like meet everybody where they are on this issue at each individual point in time. So take these with a grain of salt and apply them as they are necessary in the moment. The first one is to start preparing your kids in advance. Now, for a lot of people, that might mean, getting the clothes and start talking about the classes and getting your school supplies and all of that stuff. For kiddos with disabilities, I think it's really important that they go see the environment. For a lot of kids on my caseload, they like things are not concrete unless they see them in person. So going to the school, sending an email and saying, "Hey, Mrs. So and so or Mr. So and so, it would sure be great if my child could come and see their classrooms, meet their teachers." Um, a lot of schools do like a back to school night where you can go and you can do that in an open house format. And that does not work for Jack Barlow. That is completely anxiety provoking. It's too chaotic. It's too busy. There's people like saying hello to him, which stresses him out because he's got some social anxiety stuff. And so we go on a different day. And honestly, in our house, a big strategy that we utilize is we don't talk about back to school until about 7 o'clock the night before. And so if school starts, on a Thursday or a Wednesday, which it does in a lot of districts, I don't start talking about it until like Tuesday of that week. And so I'll usually text his special education teacher and say, "Is there a day that you're going to be up there working? Can we come bring you some cookies?" Like I give him a task. "Oh, we're not going to see school. We're going to go take Mrs. So and so some cookies. Hey, wouldn't that be so fun?" And I don't make him bake the cookies because then that's a job, right? "Let's go pick up some cookies at the bakery and we got to run them up there." Then it's an errand. And then while you're up there, then in his case, his special education teacher is a lady. So then she'll walk him through and be like, "Oh, Jack, here's your science classroom. Look, Mrs. Smith is in there setting up her classroom. Oh, hey, Mrs. Smith, this is Jack. You know Jack, right?" And Mrs. Smith shows him something cool about her classroom. And then he's more familiar with it. So that's one of the things that I like to do so that he, has a job. It's kind of tricking him a little bit, but he's getting the exposure. I remember for Griffin, we used to map out like where he had to go in the building, especially when he was in a new building. So when he started middle school, when he started high school, how far do you have to go? What route do you have to go? These two buildings connect, but they connect on the second floor. So you're going to have to go upstairs or downstairs or whatever. Remember how you did that like in college? You'd walk from class to class before. I think I still did that my senior year of college, honestly, before the semester started. So maybe that is a good strategy. I also think it's important to get your kids organized at the beginning of the school year, no matter what that means. So, a lot of kids on my caseload get anxious about schedules. What is it this day? What is it that day? What is it on what day do I have gym? What day do I get to see so and so? What day is the speech day? When do I get to go on the field trip or whatever? One thing that helped us a lot was to have a calendar in the kitchen. We had this like dry erase calendar when my kids were in elementary and middle school, where at the top of every month, I would write their specials schedule, what day they had gym and art and music, because they just needed that information. When their practices were, and I always put babysitters on it. My kids have always been interested in who was physically going to be inside our house. Like, when did they get to play with which babysitter? But, you might be keeping track of assignments or deadlines or other activities. And, you might develop a calendar for them. I have an episode where I talk about how my family is organized, like how I organize our weeks. Basically, what I do is on Sundays, I sit down, I watch the Today Show with Willie Geist, which I love, 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. And I map out our calendar's now kept on a shared Apple calendar, but I then write it all out on a piece of notebook paper, where everybody's going to be, what time everybody's practices are. I open up the email from the coach with the practice changes. I put the practice changes on there. And then from that, I meal plan. What day has to be a crock pot day? What day do we have to eat out? What day, do I have time to actually make something like a salad or something that takes a second of chopping? Um, and then I put our babysitters on that. And I put sometimes I even have to go as like detail oriented as driving. Who's going to drive whom where? Who's physically going to be with Jack? Like if I've got a 4 o'clock appointment, well, can Brandon work at home? And then Jack plays with Legos in Brandon's office while I take my 4 o'clock, like that kind of stuff. I literally have to map all that out. And then in the left-hand column, I put our babysitters, and I actually text that to all the babysitters. Yes, they know what we're having for dinner on Wednesday night, but it saves me the time and the possibility of clerical error to from like texting everybody and saying, just to confirm you're doing Thursday, 4:30 to 6:30 or whatever. If I just send them what I've got on paper, they can be like, actually, I thought I was done at 5:15, however it works. Doesn't work for everybody, but that's how we stay organized. And from my mom's perspective, it actually helps me to say yes or no to like, can I golf on Tuesday afternoon? Or is it okay if I pick up a shift at work? Or, I don't want to go to therapy, all of those things. But it also, as your kids age, allows them to have a little more independence. Jack constantly asks who his babysitter is. Well, I can say, look at the sheet. It's in the kitchen. Go look at the sheet. It's in the kitchen. And that helps to reduce his stress. Coping strategies is another thing that I like to talk about. Um, Both of my kids have ADHD, and both of my kids are very regulated by movement. And they're not going to know that unless I tell them, right? Now, in my case, I have teenagers, and they think that they know everything, and they think that I know nothing. And so I have to be a little more subtle with like, you need exercise to regulate. And with Griffin, I can't tell him every day because he's like, duh, that is true. A teenage strategy that I have to implement a lot of is saying, I'm just going to have a conversation that you're going to have to, you know, tolerate for a second because I'm going to say things out loud that I think are in your head and are in your soul. And I need to confirm them so that I can help you make decisions around whatever this topic is, right? Like right now it is, where are we going to go to college? This is a big one. And so I'm like, can we just have some conversations that like I need the words out of your body so that I know if like what I'm assuming is correct. And so the strategy that well, that's one strategy is saying those words. But another strategy I sometimes implement that is working at the moment is saying, you like, we're doing this alone. We don't have a helper, and there are helpers that you can hire. And so I say, pretend that I am the helper, right? Like, insert friend that has a helper. You know how so and so doesn't live with their college career counselor person? Pretend that I am your stranger that you don't know. And they're saying, well, in light of the blah, 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 do you still feel blah, blah, blah? Just pretend like I'm a stranger. And that has helped us pretend like you don't know me and I'm not annoying. So, those coping strategies are really important to kind of get back in place before kids go to school. In my family, it doesn't work well to be like, let's practice our box breathing. Let's practice some yoga before you go back to school. But as the leader of this house, I can get us more access to things that are calming and focus oriented in order to get us there. So for us, what that means is a little bit more exercise, more trips to the park, more bike rides, more times at the pool, like actually swimming though, more music, more social interaction, and certainly more structure. Those are environments and activities that help my children be more regulated. I certainly start to watch their nutrition too, because nutrition tends to be regulating to them. But just kind of like getting those things in place so that they transition okay is very helpful to them. Here's like my big, like, best tip that I don't know how I came up with this, but it does work really, really well. So when Jack is feeling anxious about going to school, this happens like Jack has apraxia speech. So I think one of my favorite things about having Jack is that life gets broken down so simply. And I think this is a good example of it. So anybody that has anxiety has a hard time articulating how they feel when they're feeling anxious because like you can't access the words because you're anxious. And like, yes, we can develop those skills, but that takes some work. And so if you have a child that's anxious, they might still be in that spot where they can't talk about how they feel. Like they might be able to say, I feel anxious, but they might not be able to say what the provoking thing is. It could be something they ate, it could be something. But in this case, we're talking about like anxiety towards school, going back to school, something at school, whatever it is. So I started doing an index card. I think for Jack, where he was struggling at one point was the empathy of other people. Like I think thought I'm the only person that doesn't love school. Like the whole world is like, are you excited to go back to school? Instead of like for kids that aren't excited, nobody ever says like, oh, what a drag. You have to go back to school. And so, he's told by society all day long that this should be exciting. And he's like, no, I'm not. I don't want to. I have to sit still. I don't get to go to the pool. I get the same darn thing for lunch. It's stressful, right? It's socially stressful for him in a million different ways, and it's hard. Um, and so I started writing on an index card for him. He checks in. His first period class is always, well, it has throughout middle school been with his special education teacher. And and that just kind of like gets him started. He gets some good reading. He gets lots of good regulating things. It gives him a little bit of time, frankly, for his Ritalin to keep getting situated and working in his system. And that has just been really great. So he usually starts off in his resource room. I assume that will happen this year also. So I send him with an index card on days that are particularly stressful that says, I'm feeling like I don't want to come to school today. My mom it might say, my mom says it'll be nice to be with my friends though. Or I had a hard morning. My body was really busy and I don't really want to come to school today. I got in a fight with my brother, whatever it is. I actually put that on an index card and hand it to him so that he can walk into school and be like, I'm having a case of the Mondays and give it to somebody. And then you know what he gets in return? Because now he has used words to say, I don't feel well in his way. Somebody else will be like, you know what, Jarek? I'm not kidding you. I had to have a second cup of coffee today. I am also tired. Or goodness gracious, I was up late last night and I actually got in a disagreement with my husband. And so I am also kind of grouchy. You know what? It helps to just be grouchy together. Sometimes his teachers will model things like, whew, I was feeling the same way. So I took a walk this morning and I do feel better taking a walk. Would you like to go take a walk? Whatever it is, he then has community. And having that community and that empathy has really helped him. This obviously is another example of how you can collaborate with your team because I think that's super helpful. So this index card thing has been very, very helpful to us. Now, as I'm kind of wrapping up here, the one thing that you will note is that I have not talked about zones of regulation or superflex or smarts or any of the like SEL, social emotional learning strategies, right? I do use language from zones with Jack. Like I will say, "Oh, you are feeling red." Lots of time, like Jack kind of lives in yellow. Nowadays, I really pretty much say your body's busy. I still think it's really important to label how kids are feeling if you can, if that's where they are developmentally, or to allow them to do it and then to talk about the strategies and skills that they need. With school anxiety, sometimes you don't have time for that, right? Like mornings are busy. chances are you probably have other kids that you're trying to get out of the house. Like, they have to be there by 8 o'clock, or whatever time it is. It's important, in my opinion, to be, of course, affirming of how they feel. But I kind of always say, like, from a practical standpoint, yeah, I can make anybody do anything at any time, but it's going to take some time sometimes. And like when you have to be at school at 8 o'clock, you need something efficient. I will circle back and do things from zones in our case, but I like more practical strategies that help you in the moment and then coming back to relearn other skills and strategies and lessons. So that is what works for the Barlow family. And that is that's kind of a conglomeration of things that have worked for some of the kids in my office as we've worked on this school refusal thing. Highly encourage you to try the index card because that has been really, really helpful to us. Okay, back to school. For some of you, it's in a month. For some of you, it's in days. And for some of you, you're already there. So I hope that the month of August is shaken out to be a good month for you. We are back here. We've got some new stuff coming up. I probably should have talked about this at the beginning. So stay tuned because I'm even going to be doing some giveaways because I'm going to be asking for some help here in the next month as I'm developing a couple of new products for you. So we will see you next week. Same time, same place. I hope you have a great week.